Greetings! I was sent the link to this palette. It's a new palette from Etchr in collaboration with Maker's Cabinet, and it's on pre-sale right now on the Etchr website. I was looking at it and ended up with a lot of observation or questions about it, and I wanted to share them with you because perhaps you have some insight to share that I didn't think of. Like I said, it is a collaboration with Maker's Cabinet. They are the maker of a lot of very fancy items using brass, like the hovel sharpener and the iris drawing compass, that kind of stuff. So this explains why this palette is brass, I think, because it seems to be a material they like to work with. So we get a brass palette with a ceramic insert. It is modeled after the usual travel palettes that we all know. It has two parts, the lid and the bottom of the tray. It doesn't have an extra flap for mixing. As I was looking at this, I started wondering, is this actually practical? Here's why I got to this point. So if you look at it, we have a palette that is brass, and it seems to be a relatively thick brass, and then ceramic. Both of those are quite heavy. I know that for sure ceramic palettes are really heavy. I have the Schminke palette with the ceramic insert, and it is so hefty. Also, ceramic is breakable, so in the context of a travel palette, I'm a bit puzzled here. And then you also have to consider the weight of the paints you will put in there, and the brush, and everything else you will need for painting, like the paper, sketchbook, all of that. If your brush doesn't fit in the little space for a travel brush, you're gonna have that on extra too. And at the moment, there is no weight listed for this palette, but it's going to be heavy. And then, if you look at it, there's sort of not a real quote-unquote mixing area. They want you to use the lid as the mixing area. It is separated into two sections, and I can see that happening. Not necessarily a problem, but there's no enamel, so the mixing area is not white. And I know this would be a deal breaker for a lot of people who would rather mix on a white surface to fully assess the color they're getting. Now, I know that enameling brass is not the easiest of process, but also it can be done. And I feel like if, in this case, if the material is not exactly a good match for what you need it for, perhaps it would have been a better idea to try something different? Not sure. Or perhaps another coating would have worked. But the fact that there is no white mixing area is a bit puzzling. It feels unfinished. And then brass. Okay, brass, it doesn't rust. So that's a really good point for it. It does tarnish, but it doesn't rust. So in the context of a paint where you will use a lot of water, that's not a terrible idea. That's awesome. But it is also not magnetic, usually. And if you remove the ceramic tray because you just don't vibe with it, you can't even put your magnetic pans in there. And getting to the ceramic insert, it seems to be able to fit some half pans in the wells. They give the specification of the sizes on the website, so there's that. But for the price point of this palette, and I'll get to it in a second, but for the price point of this palette, they for sure could have included a set of empty half pans. Like really. Just so at least people have a set that fits well within the ceramic insert. And then the ceramic insert. It's a much loved material in the watercolor world because it is great for mixing paint on. It doesn't bead, you can clearly see your color, it works really well, it's easy to wash, it doesn't stain really. So a great material, but and that was also an issue with the Schminke palette with the ceramic insert. But why are we using the ceramic insert to put the pans in? Or the paint in? You want the ceramic for mixing, not for pans. Its potential is completely wasted. This is not useful, in my opinion anyway. But yeah, and I had the same issue with the other palette, so it's not exclusively this palette, but it's so weird to see this sort of thing, not exactly a mistake, but this lack of insight happen again. And then finally, it's excessively pricey. Talking Canadian dollars, it's on pre-sale for over 200 Canadian dollars. For a palette that, at first glance, to me, seems to have a lot of issues. But that might just be me. So what do you guys think? Do you see something that I haven't seen? Do you have some personal insight to provide about this palette that I missed? Let me know in the comments. I would love to read your thoughts. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.